Good evening. I'm John McVeigh, the president of Walla Walla University, and it's my happy privilege to welcome you here this evening. Walla Walla University boasts of many excellent professors, one of whom will speak to us tonight. Those of us who work here regularly see these incredibly well-educated colleagues who are passionate about their academic disciplines. We see them at the water cooler, we see them in Andes and at Walmart and at El Sombreros. However, unless we are bright enough to be Walla Walla University students or to take advantage of the employee benefit of a free class, we rarely have access to why Walla Walla University pays them a fabulous salary and students pay good money to be taught and mentored by them. The Distinguished Faculty Lecture gives us a chance once a year to break this rather sad cycle, to listen carefully and deeply to one of these amazing people that we do too often take for granted. It gives us a chance to do what any self-respecting university community ought to do on a cool and rainy fall evening: think together about important themes with the help of a treasured friend and able guide. So I thank you for being here this evening. Our chair of our Board of Trustees, John Friedman, had intended to be with us here this evening, but unfortunately he's had a serious family elder care issue that he's dealing with over the next couple of days. And so I'm standing in for him in offering the opening prayer. Would you bow your heads with me, please? Dear Lord, we thank you for the privilege of gathering this evening to practice excellence in thought. As we gather, we acknowledge that excellence in thought is more gift than work, more divine grace than human accomplishment. Grant us the gift of thinking your thoughts after you this evening. In Jesus' name, amen.
I'm Pam Kress, the Vice President for Academic Administration here at Walla Walla University, and it's my privilege to introduce to you tonight the Distinguished Faculty Lecturer for 2022, Jerry Hartman, Professor of Film, TV, and Media. Professor Hartman earned a Bachelor of Arts degree from Walla Walla University in 1999, with a major in mass communications and a media concentration and a minor in religion. He received a Master of Fine Arts, Digital Semina from National University in 2008. His thesis documentary was entitled Indigenous Suriname. Dr. Hartman, a professor of film, TV, and media, has taught at Walla Walla University since 2003. As an undergraduate, Jerry served in campus ministries as director of Cable, Collegiate Adventist for Better Living, where he created events to encourage students to engage in active, healthy lifestyles and eschew life-diminishing substances and behaviors. I got that fact, Jerry, from my esteemed husband, John Kress, who was chaplain at the time, so he could tell me these little things about people in the 1990s. In 2001, Professor Hartman worked in the Philippines with the Peace Corps in volunteer training, focusing on education, languages, and cultural literacy. He was awarded the 16mm film certificate by the New York Film Academy in 2005 and a certificate of recognition as an Apple teacher. Professor Hartman's CV includes multiple pages of film and video submissions and presentations, awards, and lectures. He is co-editor, along with his spouse, Michelle Hartman, a Whitman College senior lecturer in chemistry, of the 2003 Elementary Hand-in-Hand U.S. Peace Corps and U.S. Embassies. And he co-authored with Michelle a 2010 publication entitled Suriname, Giving an International Voice to Interior Tribes. The emergence of virtual production has especially piqued Hartman's academic curiosity, and he spent a recent sabbatical studying its development and ramifications. Virtual production allows backgrounds and special effects to be generated before filming. It is a pleasure to have Dr. Hartman discuss this new media technology and the questions it raises in our ability to discern reality from fiction and filmmaking. Please join me in welcoming Professor Hartman to the podium.
Have you ever been in a place where you thought something was so real that you actually, like, your heart stopped, and then you had an instant realization it wasn't real at all? We were backpacking in the mountains of North Carolina, and my friend's older sister, who was in a pre-med class, had just been studying a lot about worms and intestinal issues getting into water supplies. And she came back, she was on her backpacking trip. We were sitting around the fire with a worm on the end of a stick, and she said, "Have you been drinking the water?" And I think all of us had already filled our canteens from the creek. That was during the time where you just filtered your water with adding some, little tabs of something to clean it out. And I started thinking, wow, usually if it's dirty at all, I'll put 2 tabs in to, really clean it. And then somebody piped up, "I just washed my ramen in the creek." And everybody realized she had a bit of ramen on the end of her stick, but because she was studying parasites, she thought it was real. She really did. As we begin today's topic, I do want to honor and acknowledge that we are meeting in the ancestral lands of the Walla Walla, the Cayuse, and the Umatilla tribes. These were full-fledged nations before fences, and I just want to honor them. Today can be wrapped up with stop and exercise informed judgment. In today's world where it's becoming impossible to tell what's real or unreal, more than ever, we need to develop media literacy tools and skills to better evaluate content before we decide what we should share, what we should consume. Today, I'm going to make a quick case for why this is so important now, talk about media construction techniques and technology, and then present some media literacy tools before ending on how powerful media is and can be. Americans streamed more than 15 million years worth of video content in 2021. 500 hours of video are uploaded to YouTube each minute. 66,000 photos are uploaded to Instagram per minute. Those probably aren't really helpful. And if information literacy, there are better ways to think about information. So let's look at per day on the average US population. About 10 hours in media. This includes radio, TV, streaming. It does not include internet usage for web applications, but if you're just surfing the web, it would include that. If we look at just video, it's about 5 hours, 21 minutes there. So video related, most people are inundated with these messages that amount of time per day. I'm emphasizing this a lot here, but let's just look at a 24-hour day. We sleep for maybe 7 hours. College students, I hope you at least get that. We hope for 8, but let's just take it to 7. And then let's look at media consumption. More than half your day is likely media messages, right? If we look at video then, it's close to a third for the average US population that we have these messages coming at us. So we're just going to provide the simple definitions first, and then we'll get into some of the technology. Media literacy is the ability to access, analyze, evaluate, create, and act using all forms of media. So today I'll be focusing more on the visual, what we see, what we hear, but you can apply this across the board to all forms of communication that impact people widely. This is housed within information literacy, and I love this definition because it has something to do with how information is produced and valued. So information literacy is a set of integrated abilities encompassing the reflective discovery of information, understanding of how information is produced and valued, and the use of information and creating new technology, participating ethically in communities of learning. So we're here in a community of learning. We need to look and understand how information is produced and valued. If you really want to know, take a video class. You'll know a lot more about how to interpret. Media is constructed. So as we look at these media technologies, from the beginning of time in filmmaking, our first question was, where do we put the camera? Where do we point the camera? We have always had those choices. Let me just point the camera here and show you this. And then let me point the camera here and show you this. In fact, those that are joining virtually are only getting that one viewpoint. With today's technology, we are so very much far past that, and we can guide the audience to look at anything we want, whether it's real or unreal. So virtual production and AI technology is what we'll talk about. First, virtual production. It's really the blend of traditional filmmaking tools, and that includes graphic design, architecture, computer science. Filmmaking altogether will encompass virtual production. Simplest definition from Weta Digital, which is a major company in the visual effects world, is where the physical and digital worlds meet. So I'm going to be giving you a demonstration specifically in Unreal Engine. It's a game engine design. First, we'll look at just a little bit of the game engine itself and about this technology. And I'm really excited about it just because of the possibilities that are available. And this is directly from our studio. IT department helped get a computer that was powerful enough to run this. So the basic idea here is that we can just navigate into a game world that's becoming kind of realistic enough to be able to be used as filmmaking backgrounds for sets. This comes from a free giveaway called the City Level, and it's for training purposes, but it's basically an entire section of LA that they have built up that cars move, you have people in the background. Some of it looks really real, some is still a little bit fake. We can still suss out that it's not quite accurate. One of the big things, of course, is we have complete control. We can just take something and delete it. If we don't like it, easy to do. We can also just change the time of day. So if we're not happy with right now, we don't have to wait for a few hours. We can just go in and change that time, and we can spend a golden hour time, 24 hours a day if we want to. And finally, just built into the system, you can add things into the scene. So there's a Quixel Bridge marketplace built into this. There's about 17,000 real world objects right now that you can just drop into the scene. And you can create from nothing if you want to add a bench. That's what I searched for. You can just drag it and just drop it into the scene, and it can integrate into that. You would have to wait for a download process. I did skip that part, but yeah, it's pretty amazing. Why now? So we're talking about this now partially because of the price point. Things have dropped so much. Computer power has increased enough to keep up with this. And there's a lot of competition in the marketplace. So as we look at this, you'll see those things coming together. This is free for filmmakers. It's free for games up to $1 million. Why would I be talking about price level of software in an academic presentation? Well, I want you to think about the number of messages that we are going to get from this technology because it is accessible to anybody, right? There is not this big price level of, I need so much money to get into this anymore. It's free. So what I showed you just now was all digital, right? So where does that physical element of virtual production come in? First, I'll just give a little bit of a background from a film 2019 called The Lion King. And the directors were able to look around and physically interact via their headsets with this space. So this interactivity is what we would say is the physical part. In fact, the director of photography said it's almost like live action filmmaking. You use the goggles to see where the action is. It's almost exactly like it was when we did real live action movies. That's the director of photography there. So everything is in-game engine. This one was rendered later, real time. I haven't done any of that, anything that big in that scale. But the next level is bringing something physical into the virtual world. So this is something physical like a person standing on a green screen and then bringing that into the virtual space. And it's quite easy. This is a layer on top of Axsymmetry. And it's basically this billboard in the scene. It's flat, but there's a little switch you can put on here that says orient towards camera. And that person then is integrated and facing the virtual camera anywhere they are. So the things that used to take us hours and hours and a team of people to do as far as compositing somebody into the scene is just, you can do this real time now, right away. I'm going to show you an example here. This is from our studio, and I did a collaboration project with Summit Northwest Ministries. Ron Hessel, the pastor there, loves to do some different things and wanted to do an interactive sermon background. So as we look at this, you can see maybe a few technical issues, but you can look at shadows on the ground being rendered real time. All of this just straight out of a computer, ready to be played. And I'll go ahead and show you what that sermon was.
To understand this and work through this a little bit better, I'm going to call on one of the best looking, brightest looking, most brilliant people I know. Also appreciate his insights on this.
Thanks for inviting me to continue this discussion. I'd love to talk with you about this important topic. And yes, I agree. You are brilliant.
What an entrance.
So as you can see, it's pretty fun. You know, with this technology, you can go ahead and, sorry, I should go back here. You can go ahead and add multiple people into the scene. It's possible to, with a click of a button, add graphics. So there's a lot that you can do with this. So I'll play one more section here. This is just showing you the graphics that you can just pop on and off. We just left the fire in the scene. It doesn't look super realistic here, but it is definitely something we could not do before.
All the commandments.
Here's another section.
Especially that very first one.
I guess that settles
That's
it.
it.
Wait. That's not the end of the story.
Who are you and what do you mean?
Just consider me a better looking, brighter version, either of you. And I'm just saying, the story doesn't end there.
So where does it go from here?
Keep reading. Let's see how God responds. Okay, where were we? Chapter 8.
So you see something up there, 26 minutes. This was a 26-minute sermon. I would never have offered to do this without virtual production technology. So this is something he could come into the studio. Granted, it took us about twice the time to set up than I thought it would, but he was very generous. He actually came back another weekend. So we set it up one weekend, and then we filmed it another. But I would never have done this without virtual production technology. So he could stand in front of the green screen and perform as live, and we could record it. The next step of this kind of technology is kind of matching more of the physical and digital, and it's using these tools as in-camera visual effects. This is John Favreau speaking.
We have put together a system whereby which we can have game engine, real-time render, and video wall technology coming together to create a backdrop for the big, beautiful world of Star Wars.
The volume is 21 feet tall, it's 75 feet in diameter, run by 7 machines.
So it's pretty amazing what's happening with technology. And there are some really positive things that can happen here too, but I do want to be clear about what's real and what's unreal here. So if you look at this screen here, this is a background screen, and this area all here is just an LED panel. There's also LEDs up here above on that part. The only thing from reality then would be our ground layer and of course our actors and somebody holding, you know, a light to add to the scene. But if we do look at this in camera, it looks like a finished product. This happens real time, it's real time rendered. We could do some of this before, but we had to take hours and days to do some of the processing. This is happening now real time in the industry. There are some other great things about it. This is Janet Lewin, and she's another producer on Mandalorian.
You can allow your key creatives to all make decisions together so that the shots are captured entirely in camera, which allows for a better performance.
So there's some amazing things about this. It makes it more collaborative. The actors feel like it's more real, so you actually get some better performances. So it's, yeah, really amazing technology. I wanted to see, could we replicate any of that on the budget that we have here at the university in our studio? And that was what my sabbatical research was about, and we did get there. If you look at what's happening here, we basically have some consumer sensors. These sensors down at the bottom come with just 5 headsets that you might purchase as a consumer. There's 2 base stations that emit an infrared laser, and that sensor then can be millimeter accurate to a location. That's where all of this technology supports the virtual filmmaking process. Basically what happens is, and this is in our studio on the computer, you can put a virtual camera in the scene, you add that virtual camera, and you map it to respond to a sensor that you mount on a real camera in the studio. So if you move the real camera, the virtual camera can move. If you look carefully in the background, you'll see real camera moving, virtual camera in the background, tilting up and down and moving, because of that sensor with millimeter accuracy doing that. So it's a one-to-one match of physical and digital. The next step is to map a screen into the space. So we have a defined place in our studio, and it's measured to our screen. In the virtual world, we have a screen, and we map that same dimensions, centimeter down to the centimeter, into the virtual space, and you put that virtual system into the game engine. So this is a screen that you can move around, you can point it in any direction for where you want to film, and then that game engine handles the rest and renders in real time a new background for a real camera that's pointing into a screen. So here's the studio. You can see, thanks to my wife moving the camera here, going back and forth, you can see parallax movement, things in the background aren't moving quite as fast as things in the foreground, and then somebody standing in between. So all of this is happening real time, this physical match of camera to virtual camera, screen to virtual screen, sensor then telling that movement to happen. Here's the kind of result. There's some work that could be done with lighting, but you get the idea where in camera, there's no post, there's no taking out a green screen. It's just shot in camera visual effects, basically. So it's pretty exciting. I'm excited about that technology. It really makes you think, like, what's real? The possibilities are endless. Right now, it's kind of a cost measure for studios. Can they travel to 8 locations in a day instead of flying people around? But it does bring up some questions about what is real, what is not, and it feels so real as a filmmaker. My next section for technology and media construction is artificial intelligence. It's been around for a while. It's really hitting the filmmaking industry a lot. I see some people already recognize these images that are not real, just some text generation I put into a program. But it's hitting the industry big time. You know, Adobe, every time they have a release of software, have new tools, their latest release makes it even easier to fill in the blanks automatically. So seamlessly replace anything you remove with one click, delete and fill. So any image you see could have this technology, right? AI technology, which can be used in a great way. We also have that hitting the video world. They have tools on the video side as well. This comes from a competing company. I mentioned competition in the industry. Blackmagic has a DaVinci Resolve as their editing software. AI tools that are really helpful are like Person Mask, Superscale. Those are really helpful machine learning tools that help us. I find some of their content cringeworthy though. I'm going to read this. So sophisticated face refinement filter uses facial feature recognition to automatically detect and track faces. You know, that could be good. Use its many parameters for general beauty work, like skin smoothing, correcting unflattering color casts, and for retouching individual features like eyes, lips, and cheeks. I wish that we as an industry are way beyond just changing reality to a beauty standard. But these are the tools that are being built in that are easier to use. And this was just advertised within this last year and is free to anybody to use. Although the machine learning tools might be a one cost upgrade. Built into the Unreal Engine is also MetaHuman. MetaHuman, pretty detailed, pretty human-like. Some of the movement is still not quite right, but you see really incredible detail here, and these are what games and virtual production is moving to. This much detail available to everybody. DALL-E 2, that was the image that came up before. This is where you can start using natural language to describe artwork and photos. And this is really exciting technology. It's fun to use. I am not an expert on how this is generated, but the basic concept is we will put 20,000 images into a machine to algorithm, and we say, let's come up with the next iteration of image that would fit that data set but be original in some way. What you can do is basically just go in and type in a prompt, natural language, university professor giving a presentation in a large auditorium in front of a large stage with a pipe organ. There's a pipe organ back there. You have to wait a little bit. It gives you some, some things to look and make your next generation better, but there we are. Not super accurate as far as believable, but it's there, and look around at the colors in this room. It's pretty good, right? So that was that one. I did a few more here. I had a little too much fun with this. College professor writing on a whiteboard. University professor in office hours. University college professor in a classroom full of students. Professor teaching at Walla Walla University in Southeast Washington State. I don't think it knew any different on that one. But my point for all of this, is there any bias in this machine learning? Did you notice anything? There's a lot of people that look like me. There's three white men in that one, I think. 3 white men in that one. 3 in that one. 3 in that one. If you look actually at what is right now, there's about, well, if you look at overall, more women teach at colleges and universities. They're not all tenure track. Tenure track women are about 44%. So if we look at what actually should be, this is not even there yet. I got some of this idea from somebody that I saw a documentary of at Sundance in 2020. It's called Coded Bias. I'm going to play just a minute of it, and then we'll do a little bit more discussion on this topic.
During my first semester at MIT, I got computer vision software that was supposed to track my face. It didn't work until I put on this white mask. I'm thinking, all right, what's going on here? Is it the lighting conditions? Is it the angle at which I'm looking at the camera, or is there something more? That's when I started looking into issues of bias that can creep into technology.
Our ideas about technology that we think are normal are actually ideas that come from a very small and homogeneous group of people.
Vast amounts of data at incredible speeds.
Everybody has unconscious biases, and people embed their own biases into technology.
So it made me really think about when I started using this tool that kind of leapt out at first, and I tried to push it a little bit further. And I do grant this is not the largest data set. There could be things in the language model that forced it to be this way. But I thought, what if we give it a prompt that I think embedded into our culture history is more like male dominated? University engineering professor working in the lab, right? 4 men. Let's flip that. What about registered nurse, which traditionally, sadly, we think of as more gendered to women. There's 3 women, finally we got something. But it does seem that these things of our history are being embedded into this new technology. These are not believable images, but I hope you think of, just as you use AI, if something's not working the way you think it should, it could be because of embedded culture, like the face recognition technology. She was actually able to talk to some of the large companies. They increased their data set to be more diverse and did get it working much better. But there are things that we will use in our day-to-day life. I know my daughter has been using this technology before I was. You beat me to it. And I know a lot of college students I've chatted with use DALL-E all the time, but have you ever stopped to think what might be embedded in the culture bias? What might be there? So just think about it. Again, those weren't very realistic. There are much more realistic images. This is from Generated Photos. They gave away 100,000 free posed non-humans to anybody to use for non-corporate work. And you'll see these all over now, I'm sure. 100,000 free. Anybody can use these. And as you look at them, do you notice anything? See much diversity in body type? They actually talk about it on their page. Diversity in body types coming, but their first data set, of course, is what we assume is, our standard of beauty, I guess, in the culture. Again, these are not photos. These are not real. They are unreal. Business Insider tracked some of these down to LinkedIn profiles for images. Some photos were on Twitter, as far as like users on Twitter. They actually found comments from people, like if they're shopping and shopping sites, they have found some of these kinds of photos, these generated photos on those sites. So just because you see a nice friendly photo does not mean that anybody's behind it, anybody real. But I just want you to keep that in mind. So what do we do if we are at this situation where we don't know if something is real or unreal? We're going to talk about media literacy in a way, and as we segue there, I want you to think about the experience of media. This is a very short clip from a sci-fi adventure film. It's actually really an ad for an LED volume, the virtual production technology. This is a short sci-fi section about a woman, a mom and her daughter, and they're on an outer colony. They're the only two people left, and they're running out of oxygen. And I'm only showing a very short section here.
With 3 hours to restore balance, remove excess oxygen consumption.
Mom, are we gonna die?
Remove excess oxygen.
It's a very short clip, but for me, when I watch that, you feel something, right? So when we watch something, we have real feelings. We have feelings that do matter. We just have to be able to then separate that from our next upcoming actions. What happens next? So as we go into this, you can have feelings from media. That's what media is all about. We have stories that move us, but we need to then think before we just start sharing what comes next. The feeling is there. How do we act on that? So that gets into stop and exercise informed judgment. And as I get into this, I want to make it clear, I am not anti-media. I love media. I have excitement for media. I want you to actually watch more things. My students that work in the industry will have more jobs if you continue to watch more things, but use it in a good, positive way. And the model that we'll work with today, for those of you that came in early, saw this, but media literacy is the ability to access, analyze, evaluate, and create, and act using all forms of media. In the middle there, if you walk away with one thing, it could be stop and exercise informed judgment. In that context, if you think about access, that's kind of the first thing. And if you take a moment's breath to analyze where you're at, where you're finding that information, just think about that. I went to County Fair this last summer, and there was literature or something left on my windshield. I didn't actually even take time to even see who it's from, right? I just tossed it because I don't know the person. If somebody had come to me in person that I knew and handed me something, I would be much more considerate, right? But online, it's the same. Is it a stranger? Are you just going to take it and use it? Even if it's your friend, I hope you take a breath and then go to these next steps and figure out what to do. So we'll spend some time in the analyze and evaluate section here. And to do that, I would like to actually watch a 1-minute film. We'll watch it twice. And it's not in English, and it's not virtual as far as the visual part, at least. If you listen, the audio is machine learning, so it's AI technology built into the audio track. So listen for that maybe, but you will have to kind of read along, and then we'll kind of work through this as we work through the media literacy section.
Qu'est-ce que c'est? C'est enfin arrivé, j'avais raison. Maintenant, c'est chacun pour soi. Prends tes affaires, chérie, on va l'appeler.
François, qu'est-ce que tu fais?
Tu te souviens quand j'ai commencé à construire tout ça? Tu m'as pris pour un cinglé.
Arrête!
Non! Je tiendrai plus
Allez, on
longtemps
va
tout
rentrer
seul.
maintenant.
C'est moi qui avais raison.
Attends, François,
Si qui que ce soit essaye de rentrer, j'hésiterai pas une seconde.
François, attends!
So a fallout shelter and somebody locking his family out and then finding out it was a surprise birthday party. We're going to actually look at this just a little bit and analyze it, because in a 1-minute film, I could spend hours on this. It's pretty wonderful. But yeah, how should we approach it? So there's so many ways into media literacy. Every academic discipline likely has some form of how to engage with content. I'm pulling up 2, or I guess a little bit of 3 topics in this area of analyze and evaluate. But first, like authorship, format, audience, content, and purpose. So we're going to dive into it with this message specifically. So who created the message? In media, if it has credits, it's fairly easy. This one, it was credited at the end. Gaspar Palacio. He's a filmmaker. He's independent from what I could find, and I'll talk a little bit more about his background, but it was created by someone. The screenwriter is someone that I recognized as well, which is good. And he gives away his content for students to produce. So it's, yeah, interesting that I found this and kind of fell in love with it, and then found out that he gave away free stuff as far as a screenwriter. But there he is, right in the credits. Sometimes you do have to look a lot harder. As far as format, recognize that creative things are built in to get your attention. For me, I loved how short this was. It fit this format, but it has such a really nice story setup. It starts right into the action. Things develop, and then it's got this really big twist at the end, and then it leaves us hanging. It actually gives some time for the audience to think at the end and consider, you know, what was he feeling? Did anyone notice the machine learning for music? It was really subtle, but there was a slight little audio track there. I do think it works. I think the siren, you know, carried a lot. But yeah, very well done. And I was probably most attracted to the story. Visually, it's pretty simple, but it's well done. I think we should watch it one more time because there are a few more things we should think about.
Qu'est-ce que c'est? C'est enfin arrivé, j'avais raison. Maintenant, c'est chacun pour soi.
Prends tes affaires, chérie, on va l'appeler. François, qu'est-ce que tu fais?
Tu te souviens quand j'ai commencé à construire tout ça? Tu m'as pris pour un cinglé.
Arrête!
Non! Je tiendrai plus
Allez,
longtemps
on va
tout
rentrer
seul.
maintenant.
C'est moi qui avais raison.
Attends, François,
Si qui que ce soit essaye de rentrer, j'hésiterai pas une seconde.
François, attends!
It's his 50th birthday, by the way, which I'm approaching here. Yeah, it makes you laugh, but there's a serious message in there too. One thing to talk about with any message is audience and how different people might understand that message differently. And there's two that I want to consider here. The first is if you look at the husband and wife relationship, there's a push that he gives. If anyone had ever been in a domestic violence situation, they would interpret this in a huge different way, right? We might laugh it off if we've never been involved with that, but that's not true for everybody. So when we look at media, we really need to not judge someone else for what they will or will not watch, right? It's all about understanding that every audience will view something differently. And then I just pulled up the gun and it's kind of dark. I don't even know how many people saw that. It's referenced in one of the lines. But if you'd been involved in some kind of trauma with a gun, you would interpret that section a lot differently as well, right? Later, we'll talk about other things to consider, like if you see yourself represented on screen, things like that. But when you think about audience, you have to kind of think about that. Think about how someone might understand that message differently. Content, you know, what values and lifestyles and points of view are represented or omitted from the message. Again, I am barely glossing the surface here, but just a few things. It's Eurocentric, you know, it comes from someone that has enough money to have like 2 buildings on their property. And I didn't get into this at all, but there are some symbols up there that I don't know. So if anybody in the audience, you know, has additional knowledge on that, you know, it's something you could actually look at, like, yeah, what is that? What's behind there? And then purpose. Why is this message being sent? This one didn't take me long because I recognized some of the companies here. Filmstro is that AI music generator. But it was actually made for a film festival contest by some brothers. Film Riot, they have a YouTube channel, and then Filmstro, I think, sponsored that. So it was, their main audience was probably the judges for that. But they posted it online. It is definitely for a wide audience as well. And for me, I think the whole message is treat someone else like you want to be treated, right? If he could go back in time, I'm sure he would, right? So I hope it's helpful to think about those kind of 5 ways, 5 items there: authorship, format, audience, content, and purpose, as one way to analyze and evaluate. Here at the university, they use something called SIFT, and I'm going to speed through this. Realize you can go to our library here on campus. There's a 3-hour course, and I think they do it even in some of the courses. But it's really helpful, especially if you're trying to find additional information. If you're trying to find information like who the author is of the message, if it's not printed in credits, use this method. And thanks, Christy Scott, for putting me onto this one. First, stop. Take a breath. Do you know anything about the source? We talked a little bit about that already. But the next one is think about your purpose. Like, why are you here looking for information? Is it for a research paper, or is it because you want to be entertained? Or is it because you want to share something with somebody else? Like, what is your purpose in this search for information? That's a big one. And so sometimes it's just a breath of, let's consider this. Next, investigate the source. So it used to be that we would kind of investigate really vertically and just go straight to the source. Instead of doing that, think very broadly, like, where is this message coming from? What are other people saying about it? Getting ahead of myself here, but Mike Caulfield, he's from the Vancouver, Washington State University campus, put this out, and he says it like this: is it an ad from the Dairy Council? So should you interpret it that way? You know, is it an ad? Or is it something that you want to read from like a prize-winning journalist? So if you know that going into it, and you know that about the source, you know, really think about that. And then find better coverage. Sometimes we dive into a source and we just look at that source rather than going outwards. So instead of going vertically and into that source, think outside and find other sources about that same information. So if you want information about milk, don't get it from the Dairy Council. You know, look for information on milk from somebody else who's already talking about that. Find better coverage. And then the hardest one, I think, for everyone in the age of so much information is to trace claims and quotes and media back to original context. It's really hard to do because we have so many messages. So one thing you could consider is, do you find any alternates to the original? So is anyone giving you some context for the event? Is there a longer video clip than just the section you saw? Or is somebody in the video clip actually explaining some context about what you saw? Sometimes that might be a better way to think about it. But it's very helpful, and I'm so glad that we do teach that here at the university. Use it. Use that SIFT method as one way to kind of analyze and assess what's going on. Then one more way, still within this analyze and evaluate, but really thinking ahead to this create and act, because we all respond to media. We might share it, we might talk about it, we might put in an academic paper, we might give it a thumbs up. So what are some of the ethics surrounding that? And these ethical and political questions come from critical social media theory, and it's really asking some kind of tough questions. But we're a higher ed university campus, we need to do this. So does the media support a particular group or marginalize a particular group or a particular person? So what's going on here with spreading that message? What's embedded into that content? Does the media promote stereotypes? What alternate messaging can I use? So is there a way to do it differently? Does the media valorize or devalue the experience of others? Those are some of the major ethical questions. There's so many more that we could add to this list, but it's a good start here. And then political. Within this academic field of study, we want to recognize that media messages is part of the social sphere and it's part of society. So related to politics, do some consideration with that message. What kind of actions or inactions are promoted by the media? Is there something built in that the media wants you to do? Is it intended or unintended, that built in? Does the media challenge what you believe to be unfair? What kind of action or inaction does it encourage? Stop and ask those questions before spreading it. Does the media support a particular group or marginalize a particular group, a particular person? What are the consequences of missing voices? This is important in politics as well. So as we look at this, we look at the ethical, the political, it leads us to the next step of what do we do next with that information? Do we put it into that research paper as a source? Maybe we watched a short video. Do we stop there after we do a quick analyze and evaluate? Or do we go ahead and share it with friends to watch? Or do we promote it and give a new tagline to it? Do we spread that message with a like, with a share? We also have to realize under this create and act section is that what we watch also gets embedded into other things that we create. So consider meme culture, right? We might take an image, replace the image with another image, has the same text and send it on, right? We're in the creation and acting phase here of this media literacy cycle. We're definitely, we're definitely using some of the original source and adding to that messaging cycle. We might do the complete opposite and take the photo and put a new text on. But all of these things you have to consider, what are the ethics of doing that? Hopefully before you send it out, right? Sometimes this doesn't have to take a lot of time. Sometimes, honestly, it can be a breath or two between hitting the share button on what we just watched. Finally, we're going to get into a section here about the power of media. And as we look at this section, I'm pulling one from a documentary and one from a feature film. And media is powerful. We don't give it the credit it deserves, but we'll look at just a few trailers, 2 trailers here, and then I'll go into the conclusion after you can see how powerful media actually is.
When you go to Google and type in climate change is, you're going to see different results depending on where you live and the particular things that Google knows about your interests.
That's not by accident, that's a design technique. What I want people to know is that everything they're doing online is being watched, is being tracked. Every single action you take is carefully monitored and recorded.
A lot of people think Google's just a search box and Facebook's just a place to see what my friends are doing. What they don't realize is there's entire teams of engineers whose job is to use your psychology against you.
I was the co-inventor of the Facebook like button.
I was the president of Pinterest.
Google, Twitter, Instagram.
There were meaningful changes happening around the world because of these platforms. I think we were naive about the flip side of that coin.
I know a lot of you have seen Social Dilemma, but there's some research, some great research that came out, and this is by the Norman Lear Center, and they use something called propensity scale matching, and they basically figure out a way to figure out two people that are quite alike, and one person has seen the film and one hasn't. So they're very much alike in a lot of other ways, but one has seen the film, one has not. The viewer that had seen the Social Dilemma, they were more likely to believe social media and search technologies have a mostly positive effect overall, but a negative impact on mental health, which was the purpose of this film. They had greater self-efficacy in their homes and local communities, were more likely to place limits on their smartphone use, and more likely to discuss social media with others. So by using this research methodology, they found that someone watching the film did change, right? We can have positive change through media. Finally, they were more likely to take various civic engagement actions, including sharing a personal story or donating to a relevant organization. So just by watching, a documentary film, the audience was changed in that way. There's a list of things, I think there was 9 or 10 that this study found. So if you want more information, check out Norman Lear Center. It's their Media Impact Center within that, the Social Dilemma. And the next, I'm pulling this, it's rather an old film, but it had a recent resurgent as of 2020 with our spread of COVID-19. I'm going to play just the trailer for it and then some similar things as far as the outcomes of how an audience was changed after. And I want to be clear here, this was people going into this with just entertainment in mind. I want a fun film to watch. These are actors that I like. Let's go in and watch this film. And then the research you'll see after will show you what changed.
It was a groundbreaking ceremony for a new factory.
Did she mention seeing anyone who was sick? Anyone on a plane, the airport?
No, she said she was jet lagged.
The average person touches their face 3 to 5 times every waking minute. In between, we're touching doorknobs, water fountains, and each other.
Matt. Mom? No, go up to your room, honey.
So we have a virus with no treatment protocol and no vaccine at this time.
Too soon? As we look at this, there's some really interesting things in retrospect, but you may have missed right at the beginning here, but there was, this was sponsored by an organization that wanted to make positive change in people's understanding on how viruses spread. This was after the SARS epidemic. And if we think about Ebola, the possibilities of that spreading. So they went into this and they made this feature film in the entertainment industry to try to get this change. They also did pay a little bit of money to the Norman Lear Center to sponsor this. The researchers say they were completely independent, but do know that going into these stats. Again, the propensity scale, the matching scale here of someone that's very alike in a lot of different areas, but one person had seen and one person had not seen the film. Propensity scale matching. Score matching, sorry. So people that watched it, after watching, they were more knowledgeable about viruses, more likely to know viruses mutate. That's a very positive thing if you look at the way viruses spread. They're more engaged in actions that could help them prepare for a viral pandemic, like preparing an emergency kit and talking to friends and family. And this one I found really interesting. They were more committed to washing their hands frequently. I don't know a lot about the wording of that one, committed versus actually doing. Maybe you can't go into somebody's house and watch them wash their hands. Maybe that's why. But people going into an entertainment film came away with washing their hands more, which is pretty amazing just for, you know, an entertainment program. So I hope you see how powerful media can be. And as a conclusion, I thought I would do a little bit of a very limited thought study. Tim Golden, if you're here, you can philosophize later about this. But I just, inside the game engine, decided to mock up just a little bit here. And we can see a person on one side of a very long wall. And they see something there, and let's call it a football. That's what the world calls what we call soccer. So football stuck there. And we would assume, you know, that person yells over the wall, and somebody answers on the other side, "Oh, I'm here. I can hear you." And that person is seeing a box, a rectangle. I didn't have time. I was going to put dice on there, but imagine it's a dice, so you think it's, you know, a square object. Two people on two sides of this wall, very divided wall. They can talk to each other. You know, they can describe what they're seeing, but they really think what they're seeing is true, right? We have such a divided country right now. If you look at what's happening in politics, are we talking to each other? So we have an adage in filmmaking where I say, move your feet to get a different viewpoint, right? We can move our feet. We can look through the camera from a different place, right? If there was a way over with a couple ladders here over the wall, we could actually look and see what's happening on each side. We could dig something under the wall, or we could make a door there as well. I think if we think of being here on a Christian campus, love your neighbor as yourself. Have we talked to people on the other side of the wall? Maybe there is a door right in the middle. We should just go talk to, find a perspective that we haven't seen before. Move your feet a little bit to get that new perspective. That's what I hope. And we can discuss, you can question my little thought experiment. It feels real when we just see that one view. Again, media literacy is the ability to access, analyze, evaluate, create, and act using all forms of media. And I hope you're just a little bit reflexive about that process. And as it happens, take a breath, think about what you're doing, why you're there, and watch a lot of media. I like media. There's a lot that you can do. And I would say now you should go and exercise in judgment. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Professor Hartman. Really appreciated listening to you. I know that I have all the questions that I'm thinking about. My name is Maria Bastien. I'm the chair of the Faculty Development Committee, and we'd also like to, as a group, thank you for being here this evening. I get the privilege of asking you what questions you would like to ask right now. We have 2 sets of microphones, and we also may have some questions coming online. So if you have a question, just raise your hand so we can have a little bit of conversation here. All right, we already have one right up here. All right, so a microphone will come in from the side there for you. Pass that through. Oh, and then we'll have one online.
Go and do that one.
On? Yeah? Okay, cool. So I just had a question about some of the research that you presented from the Social Dilemma. And from what I heard, it sounded like you were saying that from watching the Social Dilemma, the research showed that these people were more likely to do X, Y, and Z. So I was just wondering, did that research show a causal relationship or a correlative relationship between watching the Social Dilemma and having these different actions?
So it's really difficult. And one of the problems, my understanding of the propensity score matching is that you cannot always rule out something that is causing something from before. I don't have the exact answer for that. I would probably point to someone that's better at research in my area, but you can read the full study on the Norman Lear Center on how they did it. But basically they had a set of questions and they tried to match as far as a list of people that would be alike. And they did a one-to-one match of somebody that was like a woman. She was maybe Democrat. She liked to watch media with social cause, and a list of like 8 of those. They would take those and match them in exact rank of how they responded to those questions, 1-to-1, so as close as possible. And one of those may have seen the film or had not seen the film, the other had seen the film. So in every area, there was as alike as possible. One had seen the film and one had not. So, yeah. Linda Crumley might have something to say on that if she's studied that specific model.
This is a question from online. So this is a question about something that we're probably all familiar with, which is watching a TV weather forecaster. They're standing, what appears to be in front of a screen of some type, and they're kind of interacting with that. And I just wondered if you could contrast what you were talking about here with what we might see on a newscast.
Yeah, so we've been using green screen for a long time, and you can do that in real time, but usually the edge of objects aren't very good. And if you have something reflective in the scene, it reflects green. So it's really hard to get rid of. And whoever's there in the TV station, if they look behind them, they just see green. So with the new technology, if you look behind you, you see the information there. It is on the screen itself. So it's much more real in that way.
Question here in the middle, I think. That'll be.
So I was wondering, so in the beginning, you were talking about bias, and something I was thinking about is it really possible to be truly unbiased? Because I feel like something that I have definitely seen is that everyone takes information differently in one way or another. And an argument I've heard before is if someone sees 2 sides, maybe more, of problem, 2 sides of a solution to that problem, that they will be unbiased. However, I personally have believed that that is not true because the person reading or viewing this may internalize it differently. I just wanted to know if it really is possible to be unbiased.
I mean, in my opinion, I think it's impossible, right? We have unconscious bias. So if we don't know if we have something, how can you change that? But you can do education in areas to learn more about topics so that when you see something and you observe something, you can start to question whether it's there and why it's there, which can make you better, I guess, at interpreting the way forward, where to go next, I'd say.
Hello? Oh, okay. So going based off of like the bias that he was talking about, do you know if there was any conclusion?
I looked for some studies, and the DALL-E 2 OpenAI engine just came out to the public like a month and a half ago or 2 months. I couldn't find any research. I hope some people do more research. One of the interesting things is that I think it was trained with a data set called Shutterstock. So Shutterstock is an online photo community, and Shutterstock is now putting OpenAI back into Shutterstock so you can create your own images. I don't know where the bias that I showed in that really small, research I wouldn't even call it research. It was a user experience more than research. But the fact that they're taking a model into machine learning, doing the training, and then putting it back into the same system is almost mind-boggling to me. So Shutterstock, that trained DALL-E, is now back into Shutterstock as a user. DALL-E is being embedded into Microsoft Office for their next image creation tools. That's coming next. That was announced. And then some researchers have done this with video too. So it's pretty low quality, but for tech geeks, it was 1280 by 720 resolution, and natural language video creation is what's coming next. I'm sure, quickly. And I'm not saying don't use them. I'm saying use them and just think about what your results are and consider, do we want to move forward with a model that is more inclusive? Do we believe in equality? Should we actually see some better representation? Consider it, right? Use it. I think it's going to be great. I think artists are going to probably figure out a way to embrace it. Yeah.
I had a question for you, Professor Hartman. I was just wondering, as you're kind of gotten involved with this project with the Unreal Engine and using some of this virtual filmmaking, I'm just wondering, what do you think maybe a campus of our size or a town of our size might experience in the next 10 to 20 years? As this technology becomes more mature, is your department going to look different? How's it going to change things?
So I think there's definitely ways to have more interdisciplinary discussions in this area. There's a lot of computer science that is very useful when you get into virtual production because there's a lot of coding that can happen, things like that. I think it's like any other change in the industry. I think it's a bigger change than has come in a long time just because it changes the process of how we do something so drastically, and the possibilities are endless in a very fast way. But I think it's just going to be another tool in the tool set. So traditional filmmaking is still around. It has even had a little bit of a resurgence in like the Star Wars series, where they did a lot of volume work. Some of the action scenes were really kind of confined into a space. And I think some of their later series, they are now traveling to countries to do the work instead. It'll be interesting to see too, like where that goes. But I think it's really just another piece, another tool in a filmmaker creator's tool set. And students should know how to use it, especially if they're going to be producers. They need to be able to know, what are the limitations of this? What are the benefits? When should I decide to travel to a location to do something or set it up into the Unreal Engine? It's questions like that, I think, that really need to be considered. And we're coming to the place that you don't know what's real, and that's where you just have to rely on the media literacy, I would say.
This intellectual property line student is going to graduate from law.
So intellectual property is really interesting, and my understanding of what's in the game engine itself, they put a basic set of tools, and that can be used by any filmmaker, anybody that's doing production. Same with their scans of Quixel. They've bought all of that content, and they want people to use it. I think eventually we will have some court cases that will figure some of that out. I don't know the intellectual property of the data sets that create the tools, and if there will be people that made those photos and sold it to Shutterstock and signed a contract, but now it's being also used for DALL-E OpenAI technology. I'm sure their original contract said Shutterstock could do anything they want with it, but it is an interesting ethical choice. Getty is one of the huge image companies as well. They announced recently they came out against the OpenAI DALL-E concept, but then just like a month after they announced that, they bought a whole company in Israel to embed some of this in some way into Getty. And it may not be complete image generation. It may be more for sorting and for changing a picture from vertical to landscape, things like that. I'm not sure, they haven't announced details. But I think there likely will be some intellectual property that will just have to be fought out in courts before we know what happens on that. Yeah.
Other questions? All right. Here at the front. You can just raise your hand, they'll send the mic down to you.
Unreal Engine, the software is free, but the hardware is not by any means. What's the minimum cost to be able to play with those tools?
I mean, you can get into it for about 2,500. I think that something that will run an engine pretty well. I think IT spent about 1,500. I don't know if they got some deals because of the, education system. Then you need a pretty good card. I mean, one of my students, Steven, your laptop was running Unreal and some of the latest. But yeah, I would say 2,500 to 3,000 because you need a video card that can render. Higher end video cards, are better. Most of the big, the corporations, they're doing 8 to 10 machines. The one that was demoed here, I think, had a lot more than that. But yeah, that can be costly on that side. And here in our studio, we're not doing LED. It's just projected background, which is much cheaper. I'd love to do the LED. But the content, yeah, inside and what you'll see start to stream on YouTube and social media, it's coming out already on platforms.
I wonder if I can ask you a tiny question
Sure.
As we get ready to close. I'm thinking back to the time you were talking about your sabbatical research, and I'm wondering about a question that you came out with that you're looking forward to researching in the future, something you're looking forward to learning.
Yeah, I mean, whenever you do research, it seems like there's 20 different ways you can get into it. One of the biggest questions that I've had, and partly because I was asked to do this presentation, is built into the game engine itself. Like when I was looking for assets, they're very Eurocentric. So if you look at the 17,000 objects that are there, I saw a lot of neoclassical stuff. There's a lot of natural objects, but it's all very much from kind of one viewpoint. And I wondered, like, what should we do about other images? Like, who is not represented just in the image database in this game engine from the start? And what will that mean for our future of content creation, right? All the games that are produced, people that have access to it for free that make games that make less than $1 million, they're in that limited data set of what's there right now. So I'd like to research more on that topic and maybe even just, ask some communities, do they feel like they would like to be represented within that data set? What would it mean for them? How would they do that? Yeah.
All right, thank you everyone for coming. If you could bow your heads for prayer as we conclude. Our Father in heaven, we just want to thank you for the insights that Professor Hartman has given to us tonight as the barrier between what's real and unreal just blends before our eyes. We just need your discernment, Lord. We need your help, especially now that so many of us are thrown into the roles of not just a content consumer, but a content creator, a content forwarder. We just ask that you give us wisdom and insight to understand what our little action might do in the larger community. And we just ask that you go with us tonight with a bigger picture of the concept of media, which just washes over us all day long. We just ask that we just pause for that second and think about the consequences of our actions. Amen. Thank you.
Yeah.